Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, players of all ages. I'm your host, Struggle Vision Pineapples, and I'm here with my friend,
Crescent NovaSpec.
and we're here for the second episode of the HomeGrown podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to the first, and we're glad to have you back.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to us again. We appreciate all the feedback that y'all have given us for the first episode of the Homegrown podcast. Everybody who got to listen to it, thank you so much. It was our first attempt, so hopefully we'll be doing things a little bit better this time. If there's any issues, let us know. And again, thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, as the podcast stands, the theme is growth, and so we plan to grow with you. So, given that it's 2020, and it would be illegal to not talk about this topic, netcode. Specifically, I wanted to start this off with something I didn't think would happen, but SNK went back and patched Guru Mark of the Wolves with rollback netcode.
And what is Guru Mark of the Rules?
So, Guru Mark of the Wolves, it was actually the flagship game where Rock Howard, as you may know from KOF fame, KOF 14, came out. It's got Rock, Terry, it's got my boy Butts. That's actually his name. Mm-hmm. And it's an old SNK fighter. It had a POW system. It was really cool. And the big part is that it's a legacy game. As a matter of fact, the most recent release of it was, I believe, 4 years ago on PS4 as a remaster, as well as a PC release. I also had a PS Vita release. So this is a game that goes back. Mm-hmm. Which is what makes it all the more surprising that a company like SNK would go back to what is arguably a stagnant game, surviving only with its Discord community, and give it rollback netcode. Mm-hmm. Like, they were very clear that they're testing the waters with this, that they're trying to see, whether this is worth implementing in the future and if people respond with it. And there was a huge explosion of people going back and playing Guru and enjoying it because the netcode feels fantastic. I'm blown away by this because SNK, the whole reason Sam's show is not doing so great is because the online is so hard to get through because of the netcode. So for them to go back and make a legacy title, rollback netcode compatible, is amazing.
That's really good. So it really does benefit people with wired connections.
Well, more importantly, it's not just about the wired connection, because a wired connection was always a standard. You have to have that. But people who may not have the fastest up speed or down speed will still be able to play these games without impacting the connectivity of the other player and without feeling too much of the blowback themselves due to how the netcode works. If, for all those listening, if you're interested in understanding how rollback netcode works, there's an amazing write-up on infil.com, I believe is the URL. It's a KI guide. Because, as you know, Iron Galaxy implemented probably the best rollback netcode in the market back when KI was dropping. And it's really in-depth, but given the way that it looks for input data from the opponent and how it reads it, it stops the games from teleporting to try to autocorrect by instead almost making a prediction moving forward about what's going to happen next based on current game state. So, being able to do that makes lag less like the game freezing, like delay based, or rubber banding like the crappy rollback netcode that Street Fighter V had implemented, and makes it a lot smoother, which is why games like Them's Fighting Herds, now Guru, and KI are so, it's almost like playing locals. Mm-hmm. And that's awesome, because changes like that are what's going to keep, one, these dead games alive, but two, giving them the support for listening to us is going to help us move forward in the game state, in the market for fighting games, to have these problems solved down the line for us. I'm so excited to see the results of this, and I hope SNK gets this feedback and is like, yes, KOF 15 has to have rollback netcode. Because that's one of the biggest things that people are clamoring for, and one of the things that was the worst about KOF 14.
And it's also one of the worst things about Street Fighter V currently. That game is currently undergoing its patch right now as we're recording this. So we are going to be seeing the results of the supposed netcode fix for Street Fighter V.
I find it really funny that it's only after like 2 community modders essentially band-aid their netcode with a slightly better solution that Capcom was like, maybe players actually care about this.
And whenever someone does it better than Capcom, of course, they have to finally step up. So,
Yeah, well, no one can do it better than Capcom.
Yeah, of course. So, I'm glad Capcom's finally catching up. And, of course, SNK catching up with rollback netcode and hopefully keeping games like this alive. And that kind of goes into our next topic, like, how do you keep dead games alive?
We talked about this last episode, but I think Discord is still first and foremost the end all be all, right? The ability to network with people who love a game and keep a game afloat purely on passion. Perfect examples would be Guru. Street Fighter 4 still has great netcode. It still has not great netcode, but still has a good community. You can still get online matches.
Mm-hmm.
Not Street Fighter 5. I'm sorry. Sam Show 5 Special has a popping Discord, and even more recent games like Battle for the Grid, which is finally getting its own pro tour, mind you, is doing well. The Discord is always available for matches. The game wasn't really something that came out to much fanfare. There was a lot of bugs, there was a lot of problems. It was a very small roster, but the community loved it. They loved it so much that they kept it going, and the developers kept supporting it. And that is something that we didn't touch on last episode that I want to touch on now, and is that developer support is so important for keeping games afloat. Communication, content, and just being there to listen to your community. If you don't have that, your game's going to drown. And we've seen that with stuff like Marvel Infinite, where Marvel Infinite was, by all means, a fun game, just in a very lackluster shell. And Capcom stopped communicating. They stopped talking, and eventually the game just kind of died.
That's an unfortunate turn, and even with games that have been out only for a short period of time, games like Mortal Kombat have gotten the boot from Evo, but they're still getting like the most support from NRS and the community itself, just because games are booted out of Evo and don't get recognized as popular in the mainstream doesn't mean that there isn't still a community for them. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is still being played and gets like consistent turnouts if locals continue to play that game because everyone gave up on Infinite.
And a game not being at Evo doesn't have to necessarily mean the death of the game. A perfect example is Melee. That game is not dead. Mm-hmm. That game will not die. It is the zombie fighting game. But I really like that they're cycling through titles at Evo and giving other games a chance to shine. Look at Eunice. Eunice, French bread, exploded in popularity with it coming out at Evo. And with Unclear coming out this month, it's doing better than ever. And that game survived purely on the love of its community and the people who stuck by French bread, even with their first release of Eunice not being the greatest. So, since we're on the topic of developer support, there's been a lot of patches coming out this month. Not just Street Fighter, as you were talking about before, but Smash had a new patch.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the one that dropped Byleth?
Yes, the 9th Fire Emblem character in the game, I believe. And he is considered a zoning heavy blade character, kind of a mix between Ike and Link, I guess. That's the best way to put him. And they made a lot of changes to a lot of low-tier characters. Their hitboxes changes, and a lot of their shields got bigger. So characters like Kirby and Jigglypuff got bigger shields to make defense a lot easier for them. So low-tier characters got a big buff. Joker wasn't changed too much, and a lot of the high tiers got slight nerfs.
And so what's the community consensus? Because I remember when Byleth was first announced, there was a lot of anger around the release of Byleth and the decision that they felt Smash made by releasing another Fire Emblem character to cap off their Season 1 roster.
The main consensus was that they didn't like Byleth coming out at all. I think mainly the big issue was the order. I think we had a conversation about this in a few days ago where if they changed the order of the Smash release, maybe it would have had less of a bad reaction, because Persona 5 is coming out on the Switch soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know about the Switch, but Persona 5 Royal is definitely dropping, and Atlas is looking for community feedback about dropping P5 on the Switch.
Yes, so that would have been a perfect time to reverse, not release Joker at the very end and release Byleth at the beginning. Get him out the way.
Because the game that's dropping is the Mosu Fighters, like Persona 5 Rumble or something like that. Rumble for the Heart.
Been perfect advertising moment that Nintendo missed out on.
Yeah, 100%. We did have this conversation, is that the roster up to this point was showstopper after showstopper. Joker, Banjo-Kazooie, Terry Bogard,
Hero.
Boom! These are some these are people nobody... If you had shown me... There's a screenshot where that all 4 of those characters are in the character select, and someone's like, if you would have shown me this and said this was going to be Smash in 2019, I would have called you a liar. And they chose to end it on Byleth, and that's not to dump on Byleth. Fire Emblem 3 Houses was an amazing game. Fire Emblem is well loved in Japan, and even in the West, not as much as Japan. But Byleth was a cool character. I think the character design's really neat. I just don't think that that's what you should have ended your season pass on. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Swap Terry and Byleth. Imagine if the last character you saw for Super Smash Brothers was that cool animation where all the KOF characters are chasing the invitation, and Geese is jumping out of the building and Andy misses it, and then you get, "Are you okay?" That would have been so hype.
Who gets the final invitation? That would have been a great moment, but unfortunately, they missed it. But with the new changes to gameplay, hopefully it'll keep the meta ever-changing and just evolving and keeping the game alive.
You know what's a fun word? Meta. You know what game has a bad meta right now?
What?
Tekken. All right. So.
We're talking about Leroy?
Oh, yeah, we're talking about Leroy. Did you watch any of Evo Japan?
No, I did not, but I saw so much hate about it on Twitter.
All right. So as
screenshot after screenshot of Leroy mirrors.
Yeah.
Everybody picking the old man.
Yeah. So as the resident Tekken player, let me give you some juice. All right. When I'm telling you an easy 60% of the Evo Japan roster was Leroy, an easy 60% of the Evo Japan roster was Leroy. Top 8 for Evo Japan was 6 Leroys, 1 Bob player who I can't remember the name at the moment, and a Julia player named Mikio. Book ended up winning it, the Gen player, with Leroy. And I'm telling you, Mikio was the people's champion. People just wanted to see Leroy lose. People were so happy to see Leroy lose, they were actually rooting for the closest thing we've had to Tekken 6 Bob. And Tekken 6 Bob was busted. Tekken 6 Bob was like Tekken 7 Leroy. Just grand finals were Bob v. Bob. It was nuts, right? People wanted to see this guy go down. Book, for his final speech, essentially in the most professional way he could, said, "Pick Leroy, there's no reason not to." As he walked off with his, I don't think Evo Japan could pay out because of gambling rules in Japan.
I think so. They got prizes, maybe.
Yeah, they got prizes worth the value. They can't just give them money. Unless you're from a region that actually does have it. It's some weird there's an esports exchange thing. That's a whole nother episode's worth of logistics about how esports works globally. But he had his first place prize and was just pick Leroy. And at that point, if anybody was on the fence about Leroy, who was no, he's strong, but he's not busted. Leroy was on some Bayonetta level top tier garbage. Like, it was crazy.
But didn't a patch come out recently for
Yeah.
Tekken?
And what's really funny about the patch is that people are doomsaying the hell out of Leroy. It's like, oh, 443 no longer has tracking. You just gutted Leroy. It's like, yeah, well, it's also a super fast high that's still plus. Like, all what they did essentially was they took Leroy from absolutely bonkers busted and kind of toned him back into line with the rest of the top tiers. He's still extremely good. He's still super good. He still has decent damage. They toned it back a little bit. They made a couple of the moves that were negative, the same negative frames, but they have less pushback on block, so they're more straightforward to punish. So essentially, Leroy's just not going to get away with murder, which is fine. That's what we need. Like, I'm all for... And I've seen some weird takes, like, oh, they're nerfing the black dude. Like, stop it. I'm all for POC representation in fighting games. I love it. I love seeing black dudes and black ladies looking cool, busting heads. That's awesome. Master Raven, awesome. Leroy, awesome.
Tekken, I think, has a more diverse cast than like a lot of fighting games when it comes to like different races.
There's a lot of global nationalities in Tekken.
There's pandas.
Yeah, there's pandas. You can be a bear. But I hate that people are just jumping in arms for the nerf for Leroy, like, oh, you got this character, when honestly, he's still strong. You just can't win for free now, right? You can still win. You just gotta actually play the game. You know, you can't just like forward two fish all day, because that move is strong. But man, dude, like, I'll never forget that. Mikio may have not won first place, but he was a champion of Evo Japan for me. That guy took out Leroy after Leroy. People were counting bodies like 5 Leroys left, 4 Leroys left. It was crazy.
And that's an unfortunate thing with a character like Leroy. You can learn the meta so much around him, or you can just pick him and not have to worry about any of that. There's so many top tier characters that have shown what they can do. And Leroy, I think, is probably Meta Knight levels of broken. Definitely.
So, how do you feel about meta-defining characters? Like, while we're on this topic. Because, like, I look back to, like, Marvel Infinite, where, you know, very early on, it was Ultron, Dormammu, or bust. You know, or Dante Dormammu, or insert character Dormammu. You know? What's another game that has really strong meta-defining... Leroy, obviously.
Marvel 3.
Marvel 3, what you had, like, I want to say it was
5 characters that are going to be on your team for sure. Doom, Virgil, Zero, Morgan,
Dante.
No, not Dante, or Magneto probably.
Dante was strong.
Oh yeah, his assist game.
His jam session was an insane assist.
Yeah, but yeah, there was always, you're gonna have one of these characters on this team if you want it to succeed consistently.
But so what's funny about that game is that, ironically enough, I feel like Marvel 3 doesn't necessarily hit the meta-defining point because it's a one-touch game. So every character has some kind of gimmick that will allow them to succeed. Perfect example was Kane Blue River. I forgot what year it was. I think it was 2016 when he won EVO Marvel MVC3 with Team Big Body.
Yep.
And everyone was like, well, this is like they called it a Gormless Unga team, and it was. Essentially, the whole point of the team was every character has armor, we're going to try to trade with you. And when we trade with you, we get the kill, right? And it worked. So in a game like that, it's not necessarily as huge. But in these other games where you don't necessarily have everyone playing the same kind of shenanigans, having these meta-defining, like Meta Knight, as an example, like, there was a gentleman's rule to ban him, wasn't there?
Yes. At a certain point in Brawl's history, they gave up on trying to make Meta Knight legal because most matches would turn into stalling with him flying around under the stages and everything. So everybody just gave up on trying to make that character work in the meta and just gave an ultimate ban.
Whatever happened to Bayonetta? Did she end up getting a gentleman's agreement?
Nope. Bayonetta never changed, and it was a Bayonetta mirror in Grand Finals of EVO 2018 for the very last Smash 4 tournament. So she's not as good as she was currently in Ultimate, so In Ultimate, the meta's a little more diverse, and only one person playing Joker is doing well with him.
Is MK Leo, right?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of... I remember I got into an argument with this dude who's like, oh, you shouldn't have sent MK Leo to losers. It's easier. Like, shut up. It's not how that works. But, like, I remember people being like, yo, Joker's busted. But, like, only one person's turned up. Same thing for Jigglypuff. I watched a really cool documentary on Hungrybox. For everyone listening, it's called There Will Never Ever Be Another Player Like Hungrybox. That is an amazing documentary. Shout out to that video. Please go watch it. It's worth the hour of your time.
Absolutely. I've even watched that dude's other content. His Never Ever series is amazing.
Yeah. But he brought up a very interesting point, which is that there was a span of time where people were like, Jigglypuff is ruining Melee. Jigglypuff is ruining Melee. Because in an era where Melee was trying to go faster and faster and faster and faster and more about precision and tricks and all that jazz, you had Jigglypuff, who played a very slow, neutral, heavy, stalling game. You know, they forced, the character forced players to play at their pace. And had some bad matchups like with Fox and whatnot. And you had only one real Jigglypuff finding success. Hungrybox and one of the 5 gods. Mm-hmm. And yet you had people saying, oh, Jigglypuff's ruining the meta. Jigglypuff's ruining the meta. We have to ban Jigglypuff. We have to ban Jigglypuff. And I find that so fascinating that even though there's only one player doing great, MK Leo in this case, that people are going to sit there and say, whoa, this character is a problem. You know? So as a player, I guess the question comes around to, what would you rather? Would you rather have a roster that is much more clearly defined as everyone on even playing field, or would you rather have a roster where there is some differentiation because the characters are more or less unique or have specific tool sets to themselves?
I would rather the latter because I think one game that has shown us what a developing roster size can do is Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V's meta has shifted so much, and watching it evolve has been amazing in a way. Even though that game, a lot of people say Street Fighter V is V-Trigger, Unga Bunga, Rushdown heavy. It's still a deep game in some ways. So Season 1 started out with only 16 characters, and it was Nash, Chun-Li, and Cammy. If you weren't playing one of those 3, you weren't doing well. Season 2 comes out, and then Ibuki, and I believe that was also the season Balrog was.
Yeah, Balrog was nuts.
A nuts character because of Tap. Those 2 characters thrived.
Well, not just Tap, because back in Season 2, that was before the V-Trigger scaling. Mm-hmm. Remember? So, like, you could bully Balrog, and then as soon as he hits you with the James Butler and had a full stick of V, I'm calling it that. That's what it is. It's the James Butler, man. You wake up light kick. Oh, did it hit? You're going. Like,
go Butler mash in 3
the
frames.
Butler mash in 3 frames. As soon as you got touched and popped V-Trigger, you had 2 guesses. 2. And you were dead. Not stunned, dead.
Another character that did that, Abigail, Season 3, whenever he ran amok. Season 4, Bison, with V-Trigger 2, G came out of nowhere. People were hyped for G at first, and now people hate G. G is probably the best character in the game, according to NuckleDo, I believe. And we are now at like 40 characters and 2 different ways to play them. Actually, no, 4 different ways to play them, actually, with 2 V-triggers and 2 V-skills. So the meta has changed enough to where counterpicking and playing to the matchup is a lot more viable than learning one character. Another game with a heavy roster, Smash. Smash already came out with 60 plus characters, same as like Marvel 2. Whenever all the characters are available like that at your disposal, the meta can't be defined that quickly, and if as long as patches keep coming out, it will always be changing, especially with rosters that big. So even though a few characters might do better, then a small majority of the cast might do overall better than a lot of the other cast. That doesn't mean that the other cast didn't have a lot of thought and effort put into them. Marvel 2's cast was so diverse, and Smash Ultimates is getting more and more diverse as patches come out, and even like shadow characters and alternates becoming more different than their originals, like Marth and Lucina.
Right. So you would rather see a much larger roster of characters than you would see maybe a wider spread of characters being played? Or you're okay with a power differential as long as it means there's some variety?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty fair. If Street Fighter, when it dropped, how many characters did it have?
16 on release.
16 on release? And we're at 40 now?
We are at 40 characters with Seth.
Jeez.
And there might be more if rumors say.
Yeah, that's the rumor I heard, but I'm also hearing people say, nope, this is it. That's the ending. So, but you know what? No one ever trusts me, and I predicted new Marvel a long time ago. So, you know, personally, I think I would much rather take, and I could be weird here, but I would much rather take a smaller roster with extreme diversity over a necessarily like an average size roster. We'll define like, let's say around 20 is an average release roster, right? I think Street Fighter 4 had somewhere near that, like 16 or something like that, maybe 18.
Street Fighter 4 had about.
It was like 5, including Goken.
Yes, it was around 18 or 20 characters.
It was like 20 characters. Street Fighter 5 had 16. Injustice had around 20, I want to say. I think Tekken 7, when it dropped on console, had a solid 20-some, you know? But the characters the ones that really struck me as super cool is like Battle for the Grid. I'm going to bring that back up because I'm really loving Battle for the Grid. If you're listening, play Battle for the Grid. Battle for the Grid's a good game. I will shamelessly shill for Battle for the Grid. Power Rangers is awesome. Enway is awesome. It is the Marvel game that I was hoping DBZF would be, but it wasn't. But instead I got it with Tommy Oliver. Like, I ended up winning in the long run here. I don't have to block for 8 hours. Instead I have to just block for like 5 seconds and hope I guess the mix-up right. Which is the way I'd rather play. But it on release, it did not have a lot of characters. It had, I want to say maybe 10? 10 sounds about right. Yellow Ranger from Pirates, Pink Ranger Hunter, Draken, Tommy, Jason, Goldar, Black Ranger Scout. No, maybe it was lower than that. Wow. Maybe it was lower than that because I'm struggling to figure out any more characters. But my point is, all of those characters were good. Very similar to Marvel 3, everyone had their own shenanigans. So by the, what I call balance through absurdity principle, everyone was good because there was just no reason to pick someone. I mean, like, that's not true because there was still some characters who were like top tier. Obviously, like I think Goldar was top tier. Draken had a very easy to set up infinite. Jason had solid damage, but overall, like if you wanted to make the team work, you could make the team work. And to me, that was awesome because it let people really kind of get flexible. And because the roster was so small, it also made it very easy for everyone to take the time to learn the entire cast. And I think that is something to me that is a lot better than a massive roster. You know, I'm sitting here rambling, but like when I look at games like Smash or release Tekken, right? Like my mindset becomes, well, I'm never going to learn all of these characters, so I'm just going to pick one. And then I get into that character loyalist mentality. And I'm not saying that it doesn't work. Perfect example would be Jimmy J. Dude's been playing Brian in Tekken for years now, and he's of the school that the best way for him to succeed is instead of trying to learn how to play every character at a proficient level, is to learn how his character interacts with every single other character in Tekken to the finest degree. If there is ever a situation in Tekken, and this is a 3D engine in which the hitboxes are all based on character model, so you get some very funky, what the hell Harada moments. Jimmy J has seen the ones that involve Brian. But when you don't have a huge cast to go through and to overwhelm you like that, it becomes so easy to just say, I'm going to learn this character today. And just pick up another character out of the roster. And that's what I love. I don't mind the lack of variety as long as what's there is all fun. It's all good. It's not 8 Gokus. How many are we at now? Ultra Instinct.
We're getting Ultra Instinct, and then we have GT
Bardock
Goku.
is 2 Gokus, I'm counting it.
GT Goku still running the meta.
Yeah. Blue Goku. Kaioken Goku, did he come out?
That's base Goku.
Yeah, base Goku.
Super Saiyan
Goku.
And Black Goku.
Yeah, Black Goku.
That's it.
Are the kids half Gokus?
Because
that would mean Gohan and Goten. No, Goten's like a 4th Goku.
Gotenks and then Gohan, so there's 9 Gokus.
There's 9 Gokus. All right, cool. That's what we're doing.
So whenever you have a game with that much diversity like Dragon Ball Z, eventually, whenever it keeps releasing characters like that for the DLC, you're going to have one character that will break the mold because the developers have learned the game engine and they can like make characters accordingly once they've gotten to see how the players experiment with the game.
Yeah, well, it also would help they'd stop releasing Gokus.
It would help, but like I think that the big variety argument for character sizes can also be traced back to the League of Legends fighters that's also going to be coming out soon. And I'm pretty sure that game's going to have an ever-expanding, like, maybe 100-plus roster.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic.
Because League of Legends has, like, how many legends?
At this point in time, and it's been a minute since I've really sunk into Riot games, but I believe at this point in time, there is around 110 in that area, maybe more, characters in League of Legends. And we've only seen a little bit of... We've only seen a little bit of the teaser information for League of Legends, but there's a lot they could choose from. And what's really going to be super cool is that Riot Games is already coming in with a lot of clout and a lot of, like, product placement power. Like, this is going to be amazing. Just the idea of what they could pick coming into this is blowing on. Like, I already know this. We saw Darius. They're definitely going to pick Ari because those are, like, characters that just, like, stand out. Yasuo is going to be one that's going to be in there. Ezreal. Like, look at the ones that make it into the cinematics. You know? They're expanding now with these other single-player games. So, like, they're very serious about branching out further than just... branching out further than just making the MOBA and doing it well. And so I'm really excited, especially because the studio working on it is Radiant Studios. You know, they were the guys who did Rising Thunder. Did you play that game? Rising Thunder? With the robots?
No, I've never played that with... that's the one that Seth Killian worked on, right?
Yeah, it was really cool. And I hope that's the system that they're using, because it was like Street Fighter 4 without all the intricacies of Street Fighter 4. It used proximity normals, but instead of having to, like, have extreme execution in order to get off, like, you know, your focus, attack, dash, cancels, they used a cooldown system. Every character had 3 specials, and depending on if you picked the deflect or the FADC, everyone picked the FADC, there was no reason not to, you could cancel into your combos. And so it made everyone feel like they were fluid in the game. Players didn't have to fight the control scheme. They just fought the opponent. And it kills me that games now are trying to do what Rising Thunder did so well, but they're just mucking it up because they're taking away too much of They're taking away just a little bit too much from the players for the sake of accessibility. There's a line you have to find. And I hope the League of Legends fighter finds that line, nails it, and then has a plethora of already memorable characters. That I can't believe I didn't even hit down that before. It's not even like they have to make you love these characters. This isn't like Grand Blue Versus, where for the most part, West doesn't know about Grand Blue. The gacha game is locked to the Eastern region unless you have QoP. I think there was maybe one season of anime for Grand Blue and some art books that made it to the West. But generally speaking, West don't know about that. You have to try to convince people, hey, these are cool characters. League of Legends isn't going to have that. League of Legends is going to be like, hey, you know who Draven is, right? Come play Draven.
It already has that fan base and roster made out for it. The fan base hopefully is going to follow it over to the FGC side, and I hope that the accessibility from the turn-based gameplay to a fighting game transitions well for those new players coming in, because if the accessibility isn't there for them, they will just stick to the main League of Legends, and hopefully it will still keep getting support, even if that were to happen.
You know what's funny is that when I used to do League of Legends coaching back when I was in it, when I'm in my prime, I was pretty decent. I had my friend Oz to thank. He was my challenger coach. But what helped me learn fighting games, believe it or not, was that a lot of the principles from fighting games and League of Legends kind of cross over. If you think about skills like normals, right, or special moves, and recovery as cooldown, or stun as plus frames, and status effects as conditioning tools, there's a lot of crossover to the thought processes around battling your opponent in one-on-one fighting games as there is in laning phase of League of Legends and transitioning over to the macro phase. I know this is a tangent off of the normal conversations for Homegrown, but with League of Legends coming into the esports scene and with such a massive player base, the best players of that game are going to figure out very quickly that there's a lot of carryover. And we already had good players in League of Legends play fighting games. A lot of the times you would see people like Pengy Lang, I think that's his name, but Doublelift would play Street Fighter 4 in queue. And he was pretty decent. He was a decent Seth. Dyrus was the whole reason I figured out about Rising Thunders, because he would play that in queue. So these people already understand that there's a similar mindset that goes into the battling of your opponent in League of Legends. And so I'm excited to see how Riot Games as an industry applies that into the system, cooldown based, which I'm hoping that Radiant already made. This could be amazing. This could be the true breakout fighter to really implement fighting games into the larger scope.
But it could also be a flop with loot boxes. And doesn't League of Legends still run on a loot system?
No. I mean, they have a loot system but it has never been one of the egregious ones for loot boxes. League of Legends generally is a la carte.
Okay.
If you see something you want, you buy RP, you get it. There is a loot box system in which you can earn boxes and keys, and if you want to speed it up, you can buy keys, and then they'll give you things that you haven't unlocked yet, or let you collect things to random into a permanent that you won't have to buy. But generally speaking, you never have to play the loot box game. You can just buy what you want. So you're not going to get into the predatory stuff with, I'm going to dump on Mortal Kombat, and I'm sorry, NRS, but you messed up with this one.
Damn.
The rotating shop, a la Fortnite. It's predatory. It preys on a mindset called FOMO. Do you know what FOMO is?
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out. Because things are only in the shop for a set amount of time. When a player sees it and sees something they want, the thought isn't just, oh, I'll get that when I can or when I feel like it. The thought is, if I don't buy that now, I may never get that again, or I don't know when I'm gonna have a chance to get that again.
Capcom suffered and did that same exact thing in Street Fighter V with some of the fighting chance costumes for like the Ghost and Goblins, Captain Commando. If you didn't play the game between these dates at this time and do this one mission really quick, you missed it.
Yeah, and you could tell they realized that was not what they wanted to do. They probably did. So they did want to do it, but then they turned around and just gave everybody the skins for the championship edition. So that ticked off the people who worked for them, because they sat there and grinded those challenge modes in order to get the quests, in order to get the skins, only to see, well, shoot, this guy, let's say me, because I was one of those guys, who never did a lick of work, just paid $25 and got everything you worked for. Mm-hmm. And that's frustrating, you know? People would rather just be like, hey, do you want this skin? Give us $5. That's what they did with Street Fighter 4, right? If you wanted costume packs.
The unfortunate problem with Street Fighter 4 is that they weren't individual, they were sold in packs. So if you got Sagat's costume, you also got Blanca's costume and like Poison, Seth, and...
But how much were the packs?
$5.99.
Exactly. So you see my point, though, right? Is that while it's not a true a la carte system, in some ways it's better. Because looking at League of Legends, your average skin is about $5, right? Depending on the intensity or complexity of the skin. For $5 in Street Fighter 4, you got a whole slew of things. Back then, games were a lot less stingy with their content. If they were going to do DLC, it either came in the form of a new version of the game, Ultimate Marvel, or you would have a set collection of things, and you just pay them $5 or whatever the price was, and you get this whole slew of items. It wasn't until, actually, before I say this, I want to hear your input on this. We're going to put a pin in this, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to come back and get on my soapbox about this. But I want to hear what you think the best, worst, and most influential fighting games of the decade were.
Of the decade?
Yeah. So best, worst, and most influential, and define how you came to those decisions.
The worst fighting game I will give to of the decade is Super Smash Bros. Brawl.
Okay.
As many people don't want to consider it a fighting game, it was a struggle against. It was a struggle against a creator and what his game was becoming in the fighting game sense. Brawl had a trip mechanic. Brawl had a completely meta-defining character. It had a great roster, great presentation. As a video game, Brawl was an amazing game, but as a fighting game, as what people tried to make it out to be, it was not meant to be it. The creator actively put in stuff to make it not a fighting game, not a competitive game.
It was a casual consumer's fighting game rather than a competitive.
A fun party game. So with that, it led to the birth of Project M, and the backlash from the community was, I think, a necessary evil to telling Sakurai that he needed to find a balance. So I wouldn't say Brawl was definitely a good game, for sure, but as a fighting game, it was the worst. It's what people tried to make it to be as a fighting game. It was not meant to be. What I think the best fighting game of the decade is Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom 3. Because I believe that game brought the most excitement and the most consistent, exciting gameplay to the FGC during the revival era. In Street Fighter 4 times, you saw a lot of the same people playing their characters, doing their thing, and Street Fighter 4 got very formulaic if you knew option selects and how the game worked. So with Ultimate Marvel, you knew you were always going to get something exciting and something flashy and cool to watch. Marvel has always been a great spectator sport, and with the rumor of Marvel 4 coming out, I think it shows how tight and great the Marvel 3 community is. Shoutouts to Marvel 2 being at EVO as well, getting a return. The most influential fighting game, I think we both agreed on this topic, transitioning into yours, would be Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4 is the most influential fighting game of the decade. Oh wait, no, Street Fighter 4 came out in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. That also wasn't the one that I would have picked.
It wasn't what you picked?
But do you mean Super Street Fighter 4?
I guess you could say Super Street Fighter 4.
Because I'm counting that as a separate release.
Or Ultra.
Yeah, Ultra.
Arcade Edition, whichever patch you want to count it. It lasted until about 2013, 2014?
Yeah, it lasted a long time. It ended about 1 or 2 years before I entered the FGC.
It kept developing because it showed that the fighting game community still existed. It was underground. It was waiting for a chance to come back, but Street Fighter 4 was the game that brought it back, brought new faces, brought the entire FGC back to the public eye, and started building upon what made it great in the first place. It was just a really tight-knit community of people who really loved the games and wanted to show how deep, complex, and exciting they can be to watch. Street Fighter 4 was the revival of the FGC.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's a very fair point. It brought the FGC out of like the dark ages and really kind of sprung it forward and set the groundwork for esports. Honestly, the Capcom Pro Tour for Street Fighter 4 is really what general fighting game esports is based off of structure-wise. Mm-hmm. So without that, we wouldn't even have the infrastructure we have today. So for me, I'll start with my worst. My worst is going to be Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. And the reason why I say that is because there was electricity around that game. That game, it was just set up for success. People wanted another Marvel. Just like you said, Marvel fans, they're hungry. They're committed. They're loyal. They see Marvel, they want Marvel. It's Marvel, baby. You know, like that game, sort of like Melee, should have died a long time ago, but it didn't. It kept its Evo spot. It kept going because the community loved it that much. All they had to do was make an amazing game. And obviously, like, it's he said, she said about what actually happened. But what we do know is that the money wasn't there. They cut corners, they implemented the sprites from Marvel 3 and added a new shader and made an awesome fighting system with a boring roster, a terrible UI engine, a bad story, and it's just, you could have the most delicious, well-baked cake that you'll ever see in your life. But if you have to eat a 4-course meal of trash to get to it, no one's going to want that cake.
If the cake tastes good, if it doesn't look good, no one's going to want to taste it.
Exactly. And Marvel Infinite was that cake. Marvel Infinite could have been something amazing. It could have been something fantastic, and it just dropped the ball. For the best fighting game of the decade, I was on the fence. I wanted to say KOF 13 because KOF 13 was, I want to say, the last sprite-based artwork fighting game to come out in the decade. 2D fighting game. The last traditional art style fighting game before everything kind of moved towards these 3D engines or 2.5D in the case of Guilty Gear and Arc Systems. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm going to change it upon thinking a bit more, and I'm going to say the Undernight series. Because the Undernight series, from its initialization to the point it's at now, has undergone this amazing growth. And it's this fantastic game. It's a game that traditionally was sectioned off to the poverty anime group with Melty Blood and what's that game Million Arthur and your CEO Taku games, Persona Arena. But it's made it out. It's no longer a poverty game. It got its Evo stage. It's going into Unclear. The community has done nothing but grown by working its butt off to get that momentary spotlight. People have seen the game for just how truly amazing it is. And it beats out Tekken 7 because Tekken was already a household name. Tekken 7 was one of the only boys of the previous generation to survive, from the 3D fighters, to survive the Dark Ages. Even DOA took a hit. DOA is still around, but nowhere near the state it was back, what was it, DOA Extreme on Xbox?
I think that was...
Yeah, it's nowhere near that power anymore. Tekken made it back off of the mistakes of the game that I will name right after this, but it didn't necessarily do it on its own and from nothing. It did it by maintaining the truth of what Harada wanted to put out. And so that's why Eunice is my best game of the decade. Because Eunice did something amazing. For my most impactful game, it's Street Fighter V. And it's Street Fighter V because Street Fighter V is the perfect hurricane of something that shouldn't have worked, but survived. And not only did it survive, but it changed the landscape of the fighting game genre and scene in and of itself. Street Fighter V was, I believe, the first fighting game to have a microtransaction-based system. In the era where AAA games realized that phone games and free-to-play games had an infinite profit ceiling with these microtransaction-based systems. And they're like, doy, we already have these players in the cups of our hands because the competitive players have to get the new characters. They have to train. So we'll just make them buy them. And then we'll put in this microtransaction stuff so that way you can earn, quote unquote, the things you want, but we're going to drip feed it so it starts messing with people's impatience so they give us the money anyway. No, really, that's how it was set up. That's how a lot of these games are set up. That's how the predatory loot box systems work. Yeah, you can earn them for free, but we're going to IV drip feed you that free currency. If you really want it that bad, you're going to fork over the money. On top of that, I believe Street Fighter V was the first fighting game with a season pass? A true season pass. Yeah. Not just like surprise character reveals and you can purchase them as they come out, but like the first fighting game to start doing what the AAA games were doing at the time, where you bought content before you even knew what it was. They're like, hey, here's this game that we put out. Wasn't finished. They had to keep patching it, and by patching I mean finish the game. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, if you give us an extra $30, we have 5 mystery characters who you have no idea who they are or if you even want them. But you can buy them now.
I'm glad Capcom learned that mistake from Street Fighter X Tekken, because those characters were already on the disc and they still charged you for it.
Yeah.
They were finished.
Yeah, they were finished. They were locked away for purchase. But Street Fighter V was the first time that they just straight up sold you stuff that wasn't even made yet. Those were further down the sprint chart. On top of that, the failure of Street Fighter V drove other fighting games up. Because people who originally were Street Fighter V only die-hard fans now had this steaming bowl of just garbage in front of them. I know this is harsh, but it's true. They had this trash in front of them, and they now had to go try other fighting games. And lo and behold, Tekken skyrocketed in numbers and is still growing because people actually, like, Tekken was such a scary game. But when you have no other options and you just want to play a fighting game, yeah, you're going to try anything. And then you realize how beautiful Tekken is designed. Street Fighter V is only just now entering the state where it's a good game and it's on its last legs. But for the entirety of the time that Street Fighter V was around, it set the pace for esports, it set the pace for content releases, it literally pushed other games further up the market, but yet survived purely on namesake alone from Capcom. Street Fighter V, for better or worse, defined the introduction into the esports era of FGC and how games are currently being released to date. Even Grand Blue has a season pass. And if Street Fighter V hadn't introduced that system in and shown that people will eat it up, maybe we wouldn't have it.
Street Fighter V also has so much support from Capcom because they are banking on its success. They've experimented, they've done a lot to support the community and allow people to play the game from all around the world, supporting it with the Capcom Pro Tour, the Street Fighter League, which took players who weren't known and made them known, and then even the horribly ran Street Fighter League Amateur League. But that's a whole nother can of worms. But Capcom was willing to make the chance. They were willing to take chances and like use Street Fighter V as the palette of making fighting games accessible to everybody and still be fun in a way. Even Pocky Mode, I'll defend a little bit because it was something different. That's one thing that's one thing you can't knock Street Fighter V for trying. At least they try something different.
So bad. All right, you know what? I'm hungry. I think we should end it on Pocky Mode. So that's it for today. Thank you all for coming out, listening to us ramble. I'm sure we went off on some tangents, but that's fun because that's what this is a conversation at the Homegrown podcast. We let it happen organically. So thank you all for coming out. We can't wait to have you guys come back next month. We've actually got a surprise.
We have a very special guest joining us, and can't say too much, don't want to spoil it, but it's someone from in the fighting game industry. That's most I'm going to say.
Yeah, I feel like that's somewhere we can leave it. So if you want to find out, tune in next month. But for right now, I'm Struggle Vision Pineapples.
And I'm Pineapples and NovaSpec.
And thanks for coming out. Have a great night.
Later, guys.